Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. I'm Timo, I'm joined by Abram, Tucker, and Tanner, and today we are doing our thing once more, except we are doing it a little differently. As you know, Quest for the Bestest is a show about determining the best picture winner of all time. And recently, we've sat down and done a lot of thinking about how we go about determining that. You know, in past episodes, we have our list and everyone sends their votes to me and I average them, and then that placement of the movie goes on the list. And we've been thinking about it, and maybe that's not the best way to do it. And so after a week of thinking, of plotting, of doing math and experiments, cooking up stuff in the kitchen, we've come up with a new method for ranking Quest, and I'm here to announce that Quest for the Bestest ranking version 2.0 is being debuted today. We're not talking about any film. In fact, we're talking about all of them up to this point, all 35 films that we've talked about as part of the main series of Quest before this. And we're just going to go through, starting from the bottom, and talk about this sort of new list. I will give a little spoiler. It really hasn't changed a huge amount. There's a couple notable exceptions here and there, but by and large, the trends are the same. Now, who of you wants to explain how we're doing this? Again, it's a little test after our meeting a couple days ago to see if you remember what the real process is. Abram, you look like you got it.
I will explain, but I also want to make a quick note. I want to thank the, I would say, honorary fifth member of Quest for the Bestest, John Tor 11, who is the entire reason we're completely and fundamentally changing the show. So when we blow up, John, if that is your first name, thank you very much.
Jonathan Toreno! Oh my god. It's a Fast and Furious reference.
In
a lot of ways.
Yeah, he commented on a bunch of our videos and some insightful stuff about his thoughts on the films, and then on a meta level, who told us, quote unquote, love your reviews, but the scoring system sucks though. With this method, the film at number 1 will never be beat, and the later films will have no chance of getting into the top 10. So we took that to heart. We want to respond to the audience, and so we're here to do that today.
John capitalized on our thin skin and always online personalities, and it had a great impact.
So here's the deal. This is how it's going to work from here on out. We are now making our scoring system based on what we think the films deserve from a sort of quantitative review perspective. So how it works is we are each scoring all of these films from 1 to 10 with decimals. So you could give a film, a 3.7, a 9.2. That's how this works.
You can get into the nitty-gritty of it, yeah.
The nitty-gritty. We take those scores, we average those together, and then that average is compared to the other film's average to determine the position, and that is how Quest is now structured.
Yes.
Great explanation, Abram. You were the one who really came up with it, so it wasn't much of a test for you, but I'm pretty happy with how this worked out. We put it all, we've got a great, instead of just like doing this on my phone and punching it into the calculator like I do, peeling back the curtain, that's how it happens in the breaks most episodes, is I just do the average. We have a great big glorious spreadsheet with conditional formatting, and they get all sorted for us, so I just type it all in, and then boom, it tells me exactly where it goes. And I think there's no better way to get going than just to start. I want to know, based off of what you guys knew what each other's votes were, but I kept mine secret so that the final position of the list was a little bit of a surprise. What do you think is the first movie or the last movie out of all 35 films on the Quest for the Bestest?
First off, I want to peel back the curtain a little further into the demented personalities of Tanner Dykstra and I, who came out of our meeting deciding we were going to redo this happy as a pair of clams.
Oh, yeah.
Peas in a pod, whatever you want to say. We ran downstairs like boys on Christmas morning, and we opened up our laptops, pulled up our letterbox, and sat there for like 2 hours writing our rankings down and making sure things were correct. And then we got a second Christmas morning when yesterday Abram said, my Quest scores are. I'm like, so we ran up to my room, we pulled open a laptop, we looked at his scores. This is a very fun moment for the two of us, and honestly, I'm just very excited to have this happen, because it's just another excuse for me to rank movies again.
You really love doing that, and personally, I love keeping a good secret, and that's why there's little reason to reveal it now as opposed to having you guys know beforehand. But guesses on the bottom movie, just for fun. It doesn't matter.
Gotta be. I think from analyzing it, I think it was Tom Jones before Timo added his scores. So I'm gonna say it's still gonna be Tom Jones, which would be a move down for that movie. It's currently at 33 out of 35. So Timo or anybody else, what do you think? What are you guys thinking?
Yeah.
I think that's probably fair. I do think it's important to note that Tanner has the old list, so we can do a bit of comparison. But moving forward, you'll find in the description the new list, so you don't need to worry about getting confused yourselves.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We'll have all the lists updated by the time this goes live. So, Tanner, you're exactly correct. Tom Jones is sitting at the bottom now. It's at number 35 out of 35 with a whopping out of 10.0 points, 2.8. That is the average.
Oh,
So,
ouch.
Tom Jones did not get good scores. That time has not been kind to that movie. We did not like it when we reviewed it, and we liked it less on further reflection. Tucker gave it the highest score at a 4.4, but then me and Tanner said 2.0, which was the lowest score any film.
Sheesh.
No, not the lowest score any film has got, actually. A couple other films have gotten individual scores lower than that, but averaged a little
exciting.
higher. And then Abram said a 2.9 for that. You know, that's pretty low. It doesn't tie, so there's no discussion. That's the bottom, square and away. We actually have a pretty big jump up to the next film, which is at 3.7. Aggregate score is Going My Way, the Bing Crosby film we talked about. On top of that is our most recent review, which you should check out, is Oliver. We were debating between it and Tom Jones, them being right next to each other on our old list, and now they're not. They are separated. We've pulled the two brothers apart. Oliver has got a clean 3.8, 0.1 points better than Going My Way. Take that how you will.
Okay.
So
Well, at least we got the British movies down at the bottom.
in the
I'm happy
place
about
that
true.
they should go. No, I
Yes.
think there's other British movies that are spread throughout. Just to note about how I'm just going to try to speed through a lot of these, and there are some ties that we will then discuss and adjudicate and figure out where they go. So up next after Oliver is The Great Ziegfeld at 4.0, and then we've got From Here to Eternity, another big jump at 4.6. So The Great Ziegfeld was our last place on the old list, and now
Yes.
it's jumped up a whole 4 places up to the
So-
the 32nd place.
Yeah, the
Big-
bottom 5 still remains the same. Just in shuffled up a little bit, but the bottom 5 remains the same.
Yeah. So then moving out of that bracket, we've got Out of Africa at 5.7. Shakespeare in Love follows it, despite Abram's best efforts, rating it an 8.8. Some other votes.
God all fucking
That is
mighty.
pretty high.
It moved down one spot.
So it went down one spot. Well, I gave it a 3.2 because, geez, I don't remember liking that movie very much at all. And so the final score was a 5.8 for it. Above that is the old Rain Man, the Raymond movie, at 6.4. At place number 20, what is it? 27 now is going to be Ordinary People with 6.6. So you see, we've risen quite a bunch in this scale, and it's supposed to be a holistic, a full across. You know, if 5 is good, is a medium movie, and especially for Best Pictures, a medium Best Picture is usually a pretty good movie all around. That's what we kind of
Sure.
decided to talk about. So Ordinary People was at 27, and then at 26 is An American in Paris at 6.9. So we're almost, we don't really think about this in terms of school letter grades, but we're almost into the C category. We're out of failing and into.
So now you're thinking of it as school letter.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's important to interject really quickly. We're using we're doing a full 1 to 10. A 5 is a middling film. We get into good up at 7. I just think it's important to clarify for your IGN viewers that may cross over into Quest might hate their ranking system. We're stealing it kind of, but just know 5 is average, 7 is good. We're using the full 10 points.
Yep.
And we're being very deliberate to, if we feel a film is below average, to score it low. So
We should,
we're going to
yes.
be very, very deliberate about that.
The only caveat to that is the fact that we are reviewing Best Picture winners, and on the whole, they're not going to be like fundamentally broken films that deserve a half star or half point.
These are made by experienced directors, starring veteran actors, and these aren't novices in the genre in the industry.
Exactly. So that brings us to our first tie. These two films are tied amongst each other. It's West Side Story and Dances with Wolves, tied
wow.
at 7.2.
West Side Story dropped quite a bit. It was at place number 20. And what would it be at? What's it a tie for right now, Timo?
It's tied for 24th or 25th. We got to figure out which place those films go. That's our first point of discussion on the agenda today.
Now,
so
just
West
to
Side Story
clarify-
and West Side Story and what movie? Sorry.
Dances with Wolves.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I missed 2 Quest episodes. So for that one, you divided the average by 3, right? So,
Yep.
because that feels like, okay, that's very interesting. Of course, I can't speak authoritatively to West Side Story. I was off top secret military missions. I can't tell you where I was during that time. but I can tell you that I think Dances with Wolves is quite good, but Timo, maybe you can shed some light in that individual score breakdown. I know that there's a pretty big split between what Tucker and I thought of the film and what Tanner thought when I was looking on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, actually, it's going to end up really coming down to me, I think, because when you look at Dances with Wolves, by and large, it does better. It gets an 8.6 from Tucker and an 8.9 from Abram, a 6.8 from Tanner, and I gave it a 4.3 because I remember not
Good
liking that
God.
film very much at all. And whereas West Side Story gets a very near 7.3, 7.4, 7.0 across the
Okay.
board. So
Well,
Interesting.
If I may posit a bit of a position, this is a bit of a hot take that I had during our Dances with Wolves discussion. I felt that Kevin Costner is maybe a little bit of a novice behind the camera. He certainly had the budget to get the big sweeping shot and stuff like that, but they didn't seem to capture real cinematic value. And if you look across the aisle at West Side Story, that is
Robert Wise.
Robert Wise, thank you, who is obviously a veteran director and who I think, it's a bit scaled down in terms of production, West Side Story, but I think the way that he captures those giant musical numbers shows a bit more prowess, which would be me saying West Side Story over Dances with Wolves.
that's
The
Tanner's
one-
vote. Tucker, you were going to
The
say?
one caveat I would say to all of this is that your point breakdown on Dances with Wolves is the sole reason that this is a question at all. Our scores are significantly higher than yours, and if we do want to reflect the overall opinion, although numerically you're bringing it down, our opinion on the whole is that it is higher than West Side Story. If you had considered this movie a 5.0, it would be above West Side Story pretty solidly. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
You're talking to Timo, not me.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
of course.
sorry.
Because his is even significantly lower than yours, but
Yeah,
he's not
yeah.
particularly high, but it's still decent.
Yeah.
Timo Nelson, any come back to that?
Well, I do remember myself being fairly entranced by West Side Story. I actually really liked it when I saw it. Of course, there's issues with the film. Brown face, we don't like to see that. And while I think that it's a musical. The musical numbers themselves are quite impressive. And when we're thinking about musical and musical metrics, for the most part, they move the story forward. There's a couple soliloquies, a couple solos here and there where it really slows down and gets bogged into the song and the singing. But I love the color. I really love the choreography. West Side Story, I think, is a pretty cool story. I remember I was a lot more hot on the story than you guys were in that review. We were talking about Shakespeare. I think this was a little bit before we talked about Shakespeare in Love. It was the episode before, actually. And so personally, I see West Side Story as a step above just in how it looks and how it feels, and that the impact it has left on me much later. I think about that film just a bit more than I do Dances with Wolves, which has kind of just faded off into the great prairie of film knowledge in my mind.
Sure. And honestly, because Abram hasn't seen it and can't weigh in on this debate, I think it's 2v1 here. So West Side Story goes above.
Okay. Point.
Which isn't going to happen very often because there aren't very many movies only 3 of us watched.
Yeah.
In fact, there's only 2.
True.
So West Side Story is going to sit at number 24, and Dances with Wolves will be at 25. There we go. Moving on, we've got a tie right above this, so we're sticking around the 7-point range. The 7.3, we're going to have to compare 2 films that I really don't want to have to compare right now. It's The Deer Hunter and The Last Emperor. What do you say about that?
Interesting.
Here's my perspective right away, because I was really thinking about The Last Emperor when I was scoring it, because I notoriously call it my benchmark for when a film is boring.
Yeah.
And when I reflect on that film, I think that in some ways it's much more impressive than The Deer Hunter. But at the same time, I think so much of it is predicated on the sort of outside knowledge of Chinese history and all kinds of things that feel divorced from the film itself. I feel like just as a biopic, as a period story, it's interesting, it's lavish, but ultimately there's not much to connect to there unless you're bringing more into it. I think The Deer Hunter for as flawed as it is very motivating. A scene like the first Russian roulette sequence is really harrowing, and I think that how the remarkable highs of the Deer Hunter strike a lot higher than The Last Emperor. So I definitely put Deer Hunter above.
Okay.
Tanner?
These are very interesting to me because I scurried over to the document, the spreadsheet to see what my scores were, and I have these at the same score. So, and they're quite balanced in my mind. So, I think that The Last Emperor, these are two movies that are 3+ hours, I think. The Last Emperor drags on a bit towards the end, whereas I think the Deer Hunter takes a little bit to get kickstarted. If we're going for thematic value, I think the Deer Hunter wears it a bit more on its sleeve than the Last Emperor does. I think that the effort that was put into the Deer Hunter and the Last Emperor are about the same. Obviously all that stuff that was filmed in the Forbidden City is quite impressive, and how it spans this like very tumultuous history of China at the time is also equally impressive. But if I had to say, I'd go, and it's hard to say because we've also watched Deer Hunter much more recently than The Last Emperor. I wasn't on The Last Emperor review, and I didn't get to say my thoughts on it, but I did watch the movie. But I'm gonna have
Someone did their homework.
I'm gonna have to stick Deer Hunter right above The Last Emperor.
Okay. Tucker?
And I'm going with it as well. Deer Hunter above Last Emperor. When I'm thinking back on it, honestly, I think the scope and scale of Last Emperor is obviously its strongest suit and is what sets it apart from everything, regardless of the story being boring. The production value is out of this world on it, like 12 out of 10. And just the concept of it being so unique in comparison, I think has it stand on its own, but I'm probably still going to always prefer the Deer Hunter because I am such a character-focused person. And
you get... sorry. I was
Hu
going to say...
Yi is an interesting character, but on the whole, the arc is kind of like gimped, and the pacing is a little bit weird because it jumps around so much. So, Deer Hunter above Last Emperor for me.
And you get the dream team of De Niro and Defoe. No, Christopher Walken.
Right. Defoe's not in it. But,
Right.
Okay, well,
They're
that's...
two weird men.
That's very interesting. I will say, just to throw my hat in the ring, that I think I like them pretty equally. I was a little bit more bored by the Deer Hunter because of its long sequences. The Last Emperor interested in me, even if I recognized it's like not objective boringness, but like it's... I found it a very interesting film, and I just loved the production design and the cinematography, and it was like, that was, blew me away. And I think the scope is something to admire in the film, but I can see where the three of y'all are coming from with ranking the Deer Hunter a little bit above. I completely agree with Abram that the highs in that movie are so high that the Deer Hunter really just grabs you and it just won't let you go. It's got you by the balls, and it's pulling them farther away from you, to use a really, really, really ancient Quest reference there. So we can go with that. The Last Emperor will then go above the Deer Hunter. The Deer Hunter above the Last Emperor. I am so sorry. I was putting in my mind was like, oh wow, I like that movie, but the Deer Hunter will then be at place number 22. So we get to go a little bit up. Interestingly, with keeping it in at that spot, the two Vietnam War movies that we've talked about get to sit right next to each other, because coming up next at 7.5 is Platoon.
Sure.
Another film that we looked at, and I mean, my scores would seem to suggest that I liked The Deer Hunter more than I liked Platoon, which is interesting. I might have to go listen back to the episode on Platoon to really fully remind myself. But that's where it's ended up.
That's that.
Any guesses on what film comes next? We're getting up there in the list. We're at place number 20.
Let's see. Well,
I feel like it's futile. We still have over 20 to choose from, and although some of them are clearly much higher, what we're doing right now, it is reaching a range where most of us are going to give similar scores, so there's going to be more ties in this area. These movies are, on the whole, pretty similar in quality. There's some much lower and some much higher, but I don't even want to guess, because this is such a chock-full range of similar scores.
Well, since I am looking at the old list, I'm going to assume it's either Grand Hotel or The French Connection.
Well, you're You're quite right, Tanner, because right at number 20 is the Grand Hotel at 7.8, and then right above it
Interesting.
is French Connection.
Ah,
Grand Hotel, I think, is an interesting one. That one we were really hot on. We really liked that one when we talked about it.
Yeah.
But it's pretty far down the list now. Good many episodes
Not
later.
on my scores. If you look at my score, I think I'd probably put it significantly higher than you guys.
Tucker-
It's actually one of my personal favorite Best Picture winners.
Tucker, you gave it an 8.6. I gave it an 8.0. Tanner gave it a 7.6, and Abram gave it a 6.9. So they're not super spread out, but well, if you can imagine,
just enough.
It averages out.
the math does work. That's kind of the whole deal with it.
We've been controlled by wheels for a while now, but now it's numbers.
It's numbers.
I'm a little bit scared, guys.
We're gonna go
This is
back to being
terrifying.
controlled by the wheel. Don't worry.
We'll be fine.
From one dictator to another.
Yes.
Okay, after French Connection at place number 19 is Unforgiven at 8.0. Then above that is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at 17 with a score just a little bit above 8.1. Tanner, how does that relate to its place where we put it on the list at the beginning?
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It fell a few places. Roughly, what number did you say it's at now?
It is now at 17.
It was at place 15. So there's not been any huge drops or raises on the list, but it's been typically 2 to 3 spots if it changes at all.
Okay, well, up next, Spotlight might be a bit of a change because that one has come down quite a lot. It's now sitting at 8.2 at place number 16. Where was it at beforehand, Tanner? I really don't want to make you remind yourself of this, but
it was at place number 9.
so 9.
Now it's at what 16?
16, and it's not
The big
tied with
difference-
anything, so it doesn't really.
Why do you fellas hate journalism and truth? That's what I
Here's
want
the
to
big
know.
difference. The big difference is my opinion was factored in this time because I also missed the Spotlight episode, but I went back and actually watched this one opposed to the other ones.
Yeah. So that means we've got
and-
interesting point distribution here, if you will continue, Abram.
Yes, my TLDR is I think that the subject matter elevates what is otherwise completely standard filmmaking. I really don't think that there's anything remarkable about the Spotlight beyond the story it's telling. And ultimately, I don't think that's as great of an achievement when there are so many films here that are so inventive and interesting. I think Spotlight is really good at telling its story, but if it was any other journalism drama, it wouldn't really matter. And I know that we've had a contentious conversation about
hang on.
how much that subject matter should influence the score, but ultimately, I think the acting is fine. I think that the camera work is fine. I think the direction is fine. I think all these things are fine. And how much should I really elevate the fact that they're basing this on something that really happened? You know, that's my tension in my head. So I think that this film is just okay.
Sure.
What? Yeah, why would you take the story of a film into account?
No,
Well,
I think I do
because-
understand what he's saying. Is really interesting part is the fact that this really happened, and they made a film about it, but the
That
filmmaking
is
aspects of it
equally
aren't
compelling.
super unique. Unlike I think The Last Emperor, where clearly it's obviously based on a true story, but it used filmmaking in terms of telling a story over a long period of time, using set design in ways that Spotlight couldn't because it is just in offices for the most part, but that does make it slightly less unique and less compelling. So I understand what he's saying.
Let me betray the fact that I am not one of the kinophiles that reviews films on the internet. I think Argo is a much stronger film than Spotlight. And the reason I do, and I think the reason I like to bring them into conversation, is because Argo is a fascinating real-world story. But the reason I think that film is so effective is because of Affleck's direction and the tension it evokes. Not necessarily just because of the event, but the way that that film is orchestrated and the way that it pays off.
You didn't feel tension during Spotlight?
Well, not as much as
think-
Argo, I didn't.
No, nowhere near as much as Argo.
No, I think that, this is an interesting story, but ultimately, if I had read a text narrative, I would have been equally moved.
Oh, correct.
Because
I
it's
can't
not
believe-
the filmmaking elements here.
I
That's
can't
my
believe you guys.
perspective.
I can't believe you guys are shilling out for the Catholic Church. I can't believe it.
Oh
I
my
really
god!
can't.
I will just drop a drone strike of a take right here, and I'm just gonna say that All the President's Men is a much better journalism movie that does the movie elements much better, and has a
I can understand that.
if not a fairly close level of importance story that it covers in terms of the journalism world. I will note here for the viewers, Tanner did put this movie at a 9.9. He famously really likes this
Good
movie.
God Almighty!
and so
So good.
I think that's going to be the biggest disappointment on the list.
I could
Second
watch
only-
it right now.
Second only to Tanner's rating on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which sits right below it at 9.5. So
That's okay. I recognize that you guys don't like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as much, but I just can't believe that you guys are shilling out for the Catholic Church like this. I really can't.
You caught me.
Oops.
So
Not again.
The next-
Classic BLB move.
the next bit here, we've got a tie. It's not a two-way tie. It's not a three-way tie. It's a four-way tie. I will give you
awesome.
Christ.
I will give you the basic order starting from the top here. We're going to start with The Best Years of Our Lives at place number 12. Below that is Argo at place number 13. Below that is Midnight Cowboy at place number 14. And at number 15 is All About Eve. So we've got a four-way tie here. Do we want to split these into two ties? How do we want to do this?
Yeah, I think we got to do it tournament style like that, right?
I think so. So the order that I gave it to you is the raw order that is factoring in not rounding, because there is, for full disclosure, there is a little rounding that goes on with the final average of the scores.
Well, should we do this?
And we're just rounding it to 1 decimal point to the 10th place so that we can have some discussion like this, because otherwise the list would
hang on.
there'd never be a tie. Tanner?
I have an idea.
Yes.
So I think we should do this like the NCAA does it. So you do a number 1 seed versus a 16 seed. So give me the names of those movies again, and what we'll do is the movie that's highest on the list and the movie that's lowest on the list go against each other, and the two in the middle will go against each other.
Okay.
That's fine.
Sounds good to me. So that's
Doesn't
the
really
best.
change much considering they're all tied.
Starting well, The Best Years of Our Lives versus All About Eve. And now,
Ooh.
I didn't do my homework, so I didn't see The Best Years of Our Lives. So we will. I'll have to defer to the rest of you jokers about this one.
Oh man, what a battle! What a battle!
Here's
Yeah.
what I'll say. This is really difficult, because for a second I was thinking that Best Years of Our Lives was going the one that sounds like going my way but isn't, the good one, the funny one, with the dad in the house. You know what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
you can't
You
take
can't
it with
take it
you.
with you.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
Yeah.
of. Here's my opinion. That might belie where I'm thinking. I think that Eve is a much stronger film. I think that Best Years of Our Lives leaves a lot of potential on the table. I think that the amputee character who looks like Tom Hardy, whom I cannot remember the name of at the moment, is really underserved. And I think that Eve is a much stronger film. So I would give it to Eve. However, I will say that Eve is overly cinematic and overly written for my tastes. But I still think it's probably the better film of the two.
I'm also going with All About Eve for this one. Even if that doesn't belie my scores, I can't quite remember how I have them each individually rated. I'm just in this moment. I love both of those films. They're two of my favorites, which is why I'm so.
Tucker
in
gave
this
both of them
moment,
a
but-
9.7.
Okay, all right. So clearly, okay, yes, they're very tied in my mind. But All About Eve, I think is probably. It's more concise than The Best Years of Our Lives, and Eve Harrington is, as I said in our review, probably my favorite movie villain of all time. So that pushes it above.
Tanner?
Actually, Timo, I'm going to defer to you on this. I want to go last.
Well,
You
they
can't.
hear the deal
You
is
didn't
see
you
the
can't
movies.
because I did not
Oh,
watch
it's
The
right.
Best Years of Our Lives yet.
I'm going to say
Nice
Best Years of
try.
Our...
Nice try worming out of it.
But also, we already win the majority.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. I was going to say Best Years of Our Lives, but it sounds like All About Eve is winning this one.
Okay. Next up for the debate in this four-way Rankapalooza is Argo versus Midnight Cowboy. So now we've all seen these. Who wants to start? Tanner, since you deferred, I'm going to put you on the spot. You can't get out of it that long, buddy.
I
little
famously
worm.
thought that Argo was too high on our list because it was like the 6th episode or something like that we did.
Close.
Close enough. But
12th.
I'm gonna go Midnight Cowboy. Not only, mainly for the reason, this is what I always think about when I think back to Argo, is that it was great at building tension, sure, but I think we might have gotten a bit too swept up in that when we did our initial review of it. Because thinking back to it, Ben Affleck's character in this, whom I cannot remember the name of, was really devoid of any emotional connection or character traits, really. It was fun cutting back to like the Hollywood stuff, but the whole film seems kind of empty when you're not like coming off of the high octane buzz of having just watched it. Whereas if you look back at Midnight Cowboy, I think the emotional resonance of like Ratso Rizzo or Dustin Hoffman and John Voight, the coming off of their emotional connection and the friendship that they build and sort of the dirty 70s New York that they're gallivanting through is a lot more memorable than anything in Argo for me.
Okay. Tucker?
I'm going with Argo. I'm going with Argo just because, as we talked earlier, I think the use of filmmaking fundamentals there in terms of tension, especially the intercutting, I think between those two timelines, or not the two timelines, but two locations in the same timeline of Hollywood and what's happening in Iran, and plus just that's such an interesting real life story that, as is portrayed through the movie, is so ridiculous it sounds fake, and I think that the way that it portrays that through film is fantastic. And while I really like Midnight Cowboy, a lot of that movie just boils down to me to the two characters and a handful of the moments that they share. I think on the whole, I remember a lot more of the specific story beats in Argo, a lot more of the overall characters. So I have to go with Argo.
Can you enlighten me to some of the... Because I honestly don't remember a thing about Argo. What are some of the characters and stuff that I might be forgetting?
I just mean the two Hollywood guys. Of course, Ben Affleck's character, I do agree with you, he's not a great main character. None of us remember his name, and maybe Abram, but I kind of doubt it. And then we have a cast of the refugees in Iran that I think, while they aren't great on the whole, they're solid, and I think the situation they're put in is so interesting that I already remember a good amount of them.
Okay.
Well, Abram, we're going around the horn here.
I can tell you don't believe me, but that's fine.
I don't believe.
Need to.
I really don't believe you.
Yeah, so Argo is one of my favorite Best Pictures. I scored it very high. So my vote is obviously with Argo, and the reason for me is that I think that there is such a precision to Argo. You might say that a lot of its appeal is wrapped up in the tension, but ultimately it is a very tense political thriller. That's what it is. And I think that the film's ability to execute on that to the degree that it does makes up for what shortcomings it does have, which might be a lack of characterization. I think that it's a film that's fast, that moves, that enraptures the audience, and that means a lot to me, especially going up against a film like Midnight Cowboy that is kind of dank and gross and yucky, but ultimately I find to be meandering. I don't find it to really grip you beyond the sort of blanket of yuckiness that wraps around you while you're watching.
Yeah, sure.
I think that Argo is a laser, and I really appreciate that. So I give it to Argo 100%.
Okay, I'm gonna make this difficult because I am the one who's famously least hot on Argo, and there's been other episodes where I've I was a little too harsh on it when I called it a gimmick movie. I don't think it's a gimmick movie. I think that the execution of the tension and whatnot all comes from the filmmaking and from that. And I think it works for the most part, but as a film going experience, I don't appreciate that as much as the dank vibes that I get from Midnight Cowboy to really date my age right
vibes.
there. I think John Voight's character and Dustin Hoffman, they work together so well, and it's this characterization of this friendship that neither of them will admit that they're friends, but they are. Like, one of them die, I mean, maybe they're even more than friends. They're lovers, Ratso Rizzo dies in John Voight's hands towards the end of the movie, and that's a super, soul-crushing moment. And to watch this, not only that there's them as characters, but the characters of New York and as the city is a character in Midnight Cowboy. Abram, you ranked Argo at 9.1, and I put Midnight Cowboy at 9. So we're the two hottest here on these two films.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to suggest emotion,
Yes.
Mr. Timo Nelson.
Emotion
And we
on the
we
floor
can
is
vote on
accepted.
this right here.
Okay.
Perhaps in this instance, the raw numerical is what breaks the tie. That is the
totally
fifth it's the arbiter.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
That can work for me. What do you think, Tucker and Tanner?
So wait,
Makes
what,
sense. We're already tied, so.
So if we have a tie, we discuss, and it's still a deadlock tie, then the raw average
then
is what
the
dictates.
actual score. I
Yes.
see. Okay,
That breaks a tie.
sure.
A bit of a complication with that.
means-
I've looked into
Oh.
the numbers, and the raw score is an exact tie.
What the hell?
Okay. If I can go round 2 for Midnight Cowboy here.
Tanner enters the boxing ring.
I think I think there's some thematic value as well to Midnight Cowboy that isn't really there in Argo. You can really applaud the filmmaking fundamentals of Argo, and I think you are correct in doing so. But that is also something that we point out a lot in these Best Picture winners, and something that doesn't always come up is thematic value. Something that I always come back to is how the film portrays 1970s yuppie New York when Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman go into that party that's flashing strobe lights and people, the 1970s people aestheticizing poorness and poverty and the bohemia of the New York artist, and they're juxtaposed with these actual poor people who are shoving salami into their pockets from the table. It's a really compelling scene that isn't given you have to pay attention to this, but if you really extrapolate out on it, it's a great moment for that film.
I'm going to concede it to Midnight Cowboy, not only because I do think you make a great argument. I wouldn't say, at least on my personal ranking, that's accurate. However, I do have them at the same score on the sheet.
Sure.
So I clearly consider them in a similar ballpark, and it's not a huge deal for me to consider one way or the other.
Okay,
Sure.
well,
The fifth arbiter didn't work, but that's okay.
we'll try the
I-
fifth arbiter later if we need to, because I like the idea. I do want to note the Midnight Cowboy, the song that plays. Dun, 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 dun. I don't remember any of the score from Argo, but I remember that song every time it comes up. So,
Well, hey, how about that?
I don't think.
okay, so we've done a little deliberating when we figured out that All About Eve is going to go over Best Years of Our Lives, and Midnight Cowboy is going to go over Argo. But what?
So now we have to do the winners and the losers against each other.
we do have to do
determine
the winners and the
positions.
losers.
Oh, this is really the high point of the episode, isn't it?
Yes, I feel like the NCAA thing might not have been the right choice in hindsight. However,
Well-
I like what it's introduced.
Yeah, sure.
This is the battle zone that Quest never actually gets into because we barely actually
Exactly.
compare films when we review them. So this is very cool, I think.
Well, we
Best
only
Years
get
of
two
Our
more
Lives.
matchups.
Best Years of Our Lives versus Argo. Fighters, start.
Argo.
Best years of our lives.
Oh.
Since we've argued our points, let's just lay them out here and we'll get this done with.
Best Years of Our Lives. It's a tough call, but Best Years of Our Lives.
And I haven't seen Best
Well-
Years of Our Lives. So
Oh shit.
we're doing a three-way vote here.
So
So
then
it would
it's-
go to best years of our lives. Yeah.
This has suddenly become my spotlight.
yes. This is how it feels, Abram.
I'm on your side. I'm on your side. I might have betrayed you. Might have stabbed you in the back a little.
Sure.
Top 10 anime betrayal kind of thing. But I'm still
Absolutely.
on your side.
Wink.
Wink.
But no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So then the bottom two of this four-way tie have been decided. At place number 15 is going to be Argo, and at place number 14 is Best Years of Our Lives. And now we have to look at it between All About Eve and Midnight Cowboy.
You know what I'm going for.
I know what
you're
you're going for.
I'm probably going to lose, but that's fine.
I gotta go Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say it. I really liked All About Eve, but Timo, do you want to weigh in on this before I go? Because I'm thinking here. I'm deliberating in my mind.
Okay, yeah.
Tanner, just some quick information. You have All About Eve at 0.1 points higher than you do Midnight Cowboy.
I'm sure I do, don't I?
If I may make a point, and I touched on it briefly, but I was too busy trying to defend Argo, as my life was slipping through my fingers in front of me.
No, please.
If we want to think about the success of Midnight Cowboy, it's about creating this real aesthetic and creating that real New York.
Yes.
I think that All About Eve is mediated by a really pretentious script that feels more poetic than it does natural.
Okay.
And for me, I think that really foregrounds the thematic material, but takes me out of just the surface narrative and characters and everything. And I know one Mr. Jonathan who inspired this episode loves that movie. So sorry, John, we're already doing this for you.
I'm
You
on
can't
your
have
side,
everything. But I'm gonna have to go for because of that realism, because of that aesthetic, because of that richness. Midnight Cowboy.
Okay, I'm going to have to agree with Abram in the placement, not necessarily in the reasoning. I do think All About Eve has a great script, and I think it's super witty, and it pulls me along through the film, and the characters and all that are fun and enjoyable, and like Tucker says, Eve is a great villain in the film, and it's fun to watch her as the main character when, as you learn that she's really the bad guy. But Midnight Cowboy has an essence to it that I find hard to describe, and that it is this essence that makes me put it over All About Eve.
Oh, the shit.
Eve is a great villain, but poverty is a greater villain.
Okay, you know what? Midnight Cowboy goes above.
Tucker, I was gonna say, while I do have All About Eve at one point higher, to avoid further deliberation and to make sure that you don't make another concession before you did, I was gonna go Midnight Cowboy.
Okay, well then I take it back.
There you go.
My concession was solely because of that joke there. By the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good enough joke to bump me a little bit.
Okay, so in this 4-movie stretch, we've got Midnight Cowboy at place number 12, All About Eve at place number 13, Best Years of Our Lives at place number 14, and at 15, Argo.
I'd just like to say that I actually did win. All About Eve went up on this list.
Hey,
from
there
its
you go.
original placement, so I'm still winning.
I
Can
did.
I get a quick Argo comparison? Because that's a pretty big drop.
I think that is a pretty big
Argo
drop.
came from 6th place to
To 15th. 15th.
15th.
Damn, that might be the
that's
big.
precipitous.
That is a
that might be
a
the-
big drop.
That's probably
it's-
the precipitousest.
Well, also Spotlight dropped quite a bit. I'd like to
That's
point
deserved.
out.
Oh, Spotlight was from 9 to what? New placement?
16.
Yeah.
Okay, whoa. That's almost the same. Yeah.
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 Well, it is. Abram and I took it equally to heart here.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
And even in my loss, I won.
we have to keep trudging through because we are not out of the woods in ties just yet.
Oh God.
Here for the 10th and 11th place spots, we've got to decide between the most recent addition to the list in terms of years, Nomadland and Gentleman's Agreement. I know what mine is,
Interesting.
and I just kind of want to spit it out there. I don't really want to provide an explanation.
Okay.
It's Gentleman's Agreement.
Oh shit! Okay, all right.
Look
Plot
at this.
twist, plot twist. I'm also
Interesting.
going Gentleman's Agreement.
Yeah, Nomadland is a great
going-
film, and you should see it. But Gentleman's Agreement hits some other level of just movie.
I'm going
Okay.
Nomadland. I don't
Oh,
want to
boy.
accidentally
Oh,
set
no.
up the split here, but
Oh no.
the more I think about Gentleman's Agreement, the more I think it's interesting, especially for its time period, and has a clever conceit, but ultimately it's pretty standard filmmaking in my perspective, in my estimation. I think there's an invention to Nomadland that I think, in the context of itself, might have been better as a straight documentary, but as a contribution to the Best Picture canon, I think it's incredibly rich and interesting. And if you want to bring it to a level of contemporary social political themes, perhaps Gentleman's Agreement is evergreen, but I think Nomadland probably will be too. The situations are going to change a little bit, but
Sure.
there's something to be said for that sort of countercultural
It is
lens we see.
It is
So
a very
I'm gonna
interesting
give it to
point
Nomadland.
that these two
Damn it,
films
Abram.
are different, but kind of sync up together.
Kind of the same.
I was maybe like the one that was gonna make the concession here, but Abram makes too good of an argument for Nomadland. I'm sticking by my guns.
Nomadland and Nomadland, Tucker?
Gentleman's Agreement.
Okay.
I actually already said that. I mean, I have Gentleman's Agreement significantly above Nomadland. I think what it does with filmmaking and Chloe Zhao's directing is out of this world. But I'm gonna remember more about Gentleman's Agreement in terms of the things that he went through more than Fran sitting in her
It's-
car. Like I think it's a good movie. I just think it doesn't have any of that resonance that I'm looking for in terms of when I watch a movie. I want snappy script. I want memorable moments. And while there's some of that in Nomadland, it is in intentionally so, but in a sea of openness that doesn't necessarily resonate with me with what I'm looking for out of movies, especially Best Picture winners. So while it is unique, I think Gentleman's Agreement was, and probably still is, the surprise winner of all of our Best Picture winners. We're so surprised that it went so high, and it was so high because we did it so early.
Yeah.
But still, I think the fact that a 40s movie came out and it came up and we were like, holy shit, this is one of the best we've seen. I think that really holds water. This has 70 plus years of, I can't, not doing the math off my head, but of us still connecting to it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to future project for Nomadland, hard to future project for things like Parasite, but this doesn't require future projection. It has that legacy that's still connecting to us.
I will say,
Tucker also makes a great point.
I greatly enjoy Nomad. I love it. The great open spaces that you maybe don't like so much just really hit with me hard. But the way I feel after watching the end of Gentleman's Agreement, just that drive for me, the film makes me want to go out and not only change the way I act, but change the world and make it so that the world is a better place and that racism is not around. And if that's what a film makes me want to do at the end of it, I mean, woo, that is a success in terms of thematic material and whatnot.
My counterpoint to be the awful and cynical one in the room is that okay, sure, it's a nice hoorah moment, but ultimately, what does that really amount to? I think that the clarity in which Nomadland depicts our world and those who are forgotten and put on the edges of it is a lot more interesting. If we're going to talk about the movie, sure, here's this white guy who pretends to be part of an oppressed group to pull a gotcha at the end. Sure, that's we're all awful liberal arts college students. Of course, it's going to be motivating to us. But I think that there is a rawness, a cerebral element, an invention to Nomadland that is important and different. And if you want to talk about thematic resonance, I think it's there. And I don't know what Tanner's going to say. I might filibuster it. I'm not sure what I want to do yet, but I'm going to continue to make my case for Nomadland taking the tie.
What I'm going to do is get a zoomed in clip of just his reactions through all of this and speed it up by 5 times. Like,
Good.
Well, I was making those faces because you both make great points, but something that Abrams said does make me want to do a well actually, because you said that it's Gentleman's Agreement is this white guy pretending to be a member of an oppressed group. During the filming of Nomadland, apparently, these people who we applauded them as like great characters, even though they're actual real people, didn't know that Frances McDormand wasn't like also homeless. They didn't know that she was like a famous actress. So if that colors your take in any way, she was also pretending to be poor.
If I could pick up my eraser and color that back, if I can get rid of the color you've added, I think that if you start looking into the production history of most of the films that we revere in this canon and beyond, you're going to run into a lot of fucking issues. So I think that even in the context of the narratives, in the context of what they build, the product, I think that there's a lot more interesting material, both from a creative perspective and a thematic perspective in Nomadland. That's all I'm saying. My piece has been said.
Lord.
Tanner, if you can't, you were for Nomadland a little while ago.
I was, and then you make great points for Gentleman's Agreement. Can I flip a coin?
No, I will flip to Nomadland so that you don't have to feel the agony, because I think that they're both
flip
great
a
films.
Coin. I can't. I gave Nomadland a higher score, but these people are making great arguments. Tima, I need you to flip a coin. I need it.
No, what I'm saying is I think that we can. I will put Nomadland above Gentleman's Agreement. I mean, these films are just great. I think they're in great company together. I think they fit very well.
Yeah, sure.
If you were to bill a crazy wild double feature, Gentleman's Agreement followed by Nomadland might hit kind of different, actually.
Sure.
And so. Yeah, I think you make really great points. I love Nomadland. I love Gentleman's Agreement. And so I'm just going to have to squeak Nomadland above by the smallest margin I possibly can.
And it also squeaks, if it goes at 10th place, squeaks up a spot from 11th to 10th, which is interesting.
Very true.
Yeah.
But Gentleman's drops far, right? Like 7 spots?
Gentleman's Agreement drops 8 spots, correct, from 3rd to 11th. Which is, as I think, the clearest example of this happened at early on in the show.
Yes.
And it likely would not have gone that high if we'd gotten it later. But You know,
Yeah.
that's exactly the reason we're doing this now.
And Tucker,
Absolutely.
I think you're exactly right when you say that was the biggest winner of so far of these 35 films that we've talked about, the one that we did not expect to really wow us as much as it did. Because if you listen to our review, we just gush about that movie for the whole runtime. We really loved it when we were talking about it, and I still do. And so now, two films up next that are tied right after these ones.
Good Lord.
That I would not bill on a double feature. It's Chicago and The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Ooh, okay.
Oh yeah, those don't necessarily
those two
complement each
together.
other. But if
No.
it's like, you know, it's like complementary colors, like they're opposites, but you know they sort of bring out the color of each other's eyes.
No, it's
maybe.
it's like purple and brown. Nope.
I think we should let Tucker redeem himself for that awful metaphor he tried to take us down by sharing his thoughts first, because he wasn't on the River Kwai review.
True.
So I'm curious what he wants to say to this tie.
For me, Bridge on the River Kwai is an excellent movie. It is David Lean at his best, in my opinion. However, I think that Chicago is so much more unique in the ways that it uses the filmmaking fundamentals. Not only that, but the musical numbers to tell probably one of the most interesting stories in terms of lots of characters and all of their depth. I think Chicago is absolutely fantastic. It was a standout surprise for me as the one who went into multiple of these musical Best Picture winners going, I hate musicals. And I came out of the other side loving that movie and really resonating with its characters and enjoying the soundtrack and the cinematography and the set design. I think everything in that movie is just a synergy of incredibleness. And while Bridge on the River Kwai is a fantastic movie and deserves to be up this high, it isn't as unique as Chicago, I believe. So that is the unique factor, and plus personal resonance puts Chicago above Bridge on the River Kwai for myself.
I'm just gonna butt in right here because this episode is already gonna be one of our longest because we have a lot more to get through. And just throw my hat in the ring because it will affect you. That I actually agree with Tucker. I think Chicago is the best musical that we have on this list. I like Bridge on the River Kwai a lot, but it does not compare to David Lean's other films in my mind. There is we talked about it on the review. The second half, there's the character, the American whatever Major Shear's girlfriend on the beach, which is completely out of left field, and we have this whole second half of the film where they're trying to blow it up. That is just not as interesting as the building and the conflict between the Japanese colonel and the British colonel. While the acting and the production and that last shot there with the train falling off the bridge is just like mind-blowingly amazing. I think Chicago pulls through when you have these musical numbers that are just like super, super inventive. It does the best on my number one metric of will I like a musical or not. Every single one is rocketing that story forward. We are moving. Yeah. The plot is happening while we're singing, and I just love to see that in a musical. And the song and dance is pretty good, and the production design is also pretty good. I don't think it compares to Bridge on the River Kwai in terms of that, but on the whole, I would put Chicago just a bit above Bridge. So having said that, you know me, I love my David Lean. I just wanted to get that in there before.
Sure. You're a lean man.
That I am.
And I think I know where Abram and I get to follow this, so I'll let Abram go first and probably be the decider here.
Yeah, let me say two things. First of all, this is a very important Quest episode, Timo, so I'm going to drink in these ties and I'm going to talk about them. If we got to go 2 hours, I want to do it because I think it's worth it for the sanctity of the list and the programming. But here's what I'll say. No need for a tie here. I think Chicago is absolute money. I think this film front to back is inventive. I think it's breaking the sort of conventions and tropes we've...
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
What's it from, Tanner?
It's from Swingers. And I assume Abram was making a Swingers reference there by comparing this film to money. To being money. Which is something that was started in Swingers.
You just blew up my proverbial Kwai Bridge because I have no idea what I was saying anymore. But I will say that Chicago goes above. I think that movie is exceptional.
I'm very sorry about that.
Tanner?
I'm assuming you agree?
It was relevant though. You weren't doing it out of spite. You literally had something that physically was representing what he was saying.
I'm very sorry.
You're a Kwai man.
I'm a Kwai man. I'm a Kwai man.
Part of the choir.
I'm of the Kwai.
It place.
Yeah, I'm of the quiet place.
God,
Sure.
just,
Oh,
just say
Christ.
your,
Christ.
just say your spiel.
I like Bridge on the River Kwai. I really like Alec Guinness in it. I think he has a really great character arc and portrays some really great themes and character moments that I maybe didn't get in Chicago, because I think the musical aspects that we were talking about are great and they do progress the story, but there's no like regular story progression in there, which I just can't really get behind from a I'm losing my mind on this long quest episode. From a filmmaking perspective, I really can't get behind the fact that there's no like real regular like non-musical story progression.
Okay. Well, that's the
Too bad.
That is
Yeah,
it
I know,
decided.
I know.
And I want to say, Tanner, it's nowhere near a hard choice for you, because you have Bridge on the River Kwai almost 2 whole points above Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's go.
We get a little break. Actually,
trucking.
We get a small break where we just get
thank
to
God.
we get to talk about the Hurt Locker, because it's sitting at place number 7 with a cool 8.8 points, not tied
okay.
with anything.
Tasty, and I'll take it.
Is that a decrease, increase, or about the same?
Up 1
Up
Good.
1.
to 7.
The Hurt
Good.
Locker is a good movie.
Great movie.
It is a good movie, isn't
So
it?
that one we paired with Argo, and I used to think we were hot on it, but I don't think so much anymore. I think it kind of deserves to be up there.
Yes.
Okay.
And now
What's next, Timo?
a little tie, a little drama.
That was a nice little break, wasn't it?
Yes. You got to rest your brain for a second between comparing films. And now at 8.9 points, we've almost crossed the 9-point threshold. But we haven't quite yet. It's going to be You Can't Take It With You versus Kramer versus Kramer versus Kramer.
Wow.
No.
Okay. Kramer vs. Kramer moved up quite a bit here, which is impressive. And Tanner, that's a win for you. You didn't necessarily get your spotlight win, but your good old KVK has shot up. But Abram has not seen this one.
Yeah, so I gotta jump out. All I will say is that Apocalypse Now should have won anyway. So what does it even matter?
I'm gonna
that's
have
fair.
to I'm gonna have to jump on that bandwagon too, Abram. That You Can't Take It With You is funny and is dramatic and is surprisingly endearing. And God damn it, why didn't Apocalypse Now win? I will forever not like Kramer versus Kramer a little bit because of that. It's a good movie. It should not have won Best Picture.
I like Kramer vs. Kramer a lot because it's Marriage Story with good characters and emotion, and it's way better than Marriage Story. But not only that, but You Can't Take It With You is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it does everything that I want out of a film. Ensemble cast, plenty of memorable characters, lots of memorable moments, a great set that's interacted with. It's got themes, it's got a great script, it's got everything I could want. Really great actors. You got your James Stewart in there, you know.
Yeah, well, Jimmy Stewart. Isn't Lionel Barrymore in it too?
Lionel Barrymore is the grandpa.
Yeah. Oh, we love Lionel Barrymore. We
2 bangers of actors, but I just think it's solidly above Kramer vs. Kramer, even though I quite like that movie. We're talking about we're sifting for the top around here though.
yes.
Well, once again, my vote is irrelevant, but I just think that like
As it should be.
as it should be. I know, I'm aware, but these films are very, very close in my mind again. But I just got to go with the powerhouse of Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep. They're very down to earth in this movie. There's the sequence that always
as
sticks
down
with
to
me
earth as
is
a New
like,
Yorker can get.
well, yeah,
No,
but it like Tucker compared this to Marriage Story, and a lot of people have. It is much more grounded and human than Marriage Story is. Marriage Story is all about these big emotions, but if you look at Kramer versus Kramer, it's like a knockdown, drag out. You feel bad for both of these people in the divorce court. And, you know, there's that sequence where Dustin Hoffman is racing his child through the streets of New York because he fell off the monkey bars. And there's just that raw emotion of, like, he cares for this child. And it's hard to raise him on his own. And he recognizes that. But he still wants to win this case. And it's tearing him apart inside. And, yeah, I just think that raw emotion of Kramer versus Kramer ticks it above You Can't Take It With You. The very heartfelt, earnest You Can't Take It With You.
Okay, well, impassioned speech there, Tanner. And Kramer vs. Kramer is a good movie. I'll give it that at a minimum. But You Can't Take It With You is going to sit at 5th place. And Kramer versus Kramer at number 6. That's still an increase. I think that's an increase for both of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a significant increase for Kramer versus Kramer, and
Yeah.
it's a 2-point increase for You Can't Take It With You.
There you go.
All right, and now We're into it because these last 4 movies, if you're keeping track, have all been rated a solid 10 out of 10 by one of us.
Oh,
At least one.
at least one. Of us.
Well,
Yeah.
there.
This
Yes.
is high stakes, and I want to say this.
Yes.
Again, the 3 of us, excluding Timo, entered our scores prior to today. And before we did, Godfather was not number 1. But there
True.
were some very close decimals, and we were saying privately it all comes down to Timo. So this is
Yes.
where the list really breaks itself. I'm
The
very
top
excited.
4. The top 4. We're nearly halfway through the quest for the bestest.
Guys, I'm sweating.
We're doing the
shaking.
great we're doing the great re-rank here. Timo,
I'm sweating
what
too,
is-
Tucker, but that's because my air
what
conditioning
is-
is off for the sake of recording.
My heart is actually beating very fast right now.
Okay,
Okay.
then we've got a tie though for 3rd and 4th place.
Good lord.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Here we go. Here we go. We're
We're
dragging it out.
first though, so that's good enough.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the last tie because the 2 top films are decided.
Okay.
This tie is gonna be it's gonna be a slugfest. We're gonna be going at it here, and if there are insults thrown, at least from me, I don't mean it. Okay. It's
We're all friends
Godfather
here.
Part 2 versus Lord of the Rings: Return of the King.
That was
Oh,
the
no.
recommendation.
Oh, wow.
This is
Oh,
really
no.
hard. This is really hard.
No,
So-
not really.
So remember
Oh,
that
well, not
Godfather
for you,
Part 2
Tucker.
was a lot lower. Well, thanks to a certain individual. We actually have debated. We pulled this one up once more. This is the second time we've debated re-ranking the list. And Return of the King is the most recent addition in the very top or upper echelon. We did Return of the King not that long ago. It was episode 31. And it landed at place number 4. So wherever here's the thing though. Wherever Return of the King goes, which I gave a 10. I love that movie. It's a great movie. Wherever it goes, it's still at
too
place
low.
number 4. So I'm pretty happy actually where it goes because place 4 was a bit higher even than I really expected it. But let's get into it. Godfather Part 2 versus Return of the King. Well,
I think we should lay out our votes flat out before we start deliberation.
Well, here's the thing. I don't really know because I have both these films at the same score.
yeah, and
Um,
well, I have Return of the King at a 10, and Abram has Godfather Part 2 at a 10, and so I think that's going to come Tucker. I think you get to start on this one because you have a difference in your votes.
I do, and it's Godfather Part 2 above Return of the King. I think Return of
Oh.
the King is interesting, but I think Godfather Part 2 is more interesting. I prefer Michael's character in that over anyone in Return of the King. And while I think production design and everything that went into Return of the King is insane, and it does deserve this high place, even if it doesn't like subjectively resonate with me.
Mhm.
Godfather Part 2 is not only more important, I believe, but more interesting from a character perspective. And the fact is that Return of the King, obviously, this is not a huge criticism, but it doesn't really stand on its own. While I think that we're talking about 2 sequels here, I think Godfather Part 2 stands on its own a lot better than Return of the King does as a sequel movie. And we get two storylines for the price of one in Godfather Part 2.
Yeah.
With both the Vito and Michael storylines. So that's my up for me. Godfather Part 2
Boy.
Tanner?
for 3rd place.
Tucker brings up a great point about these both being sequels, because that's how I was trying to, like, should we measure these on them standing alone? I don't think that's necessarily fair, but
But you can't.
I can't. Yeah, and if you do, I think Godfather Part 2 does stand on its own better than Return of the King. But as we talked about multiple times, Return of the King, that Best Picture one is really for the Lord of the Rings series, and oh boy. On my own personal list, I have Return of the King at number 4 and Godfather Part 2 at number 5. The one thing I don't like about Godfather Part 2 is I don't find that Robert De Niro, Vito Corleone plotline as compelling as Michael's plotline. But I think I said this when we re-reviewed it. I view it as absolutely necessary, intrinsic. You take that out and the Jenga tower of Godfather Part 2 falls apart. Whereas maybe if you pull out maybe like a minor plot line of Returning the King, that Jenga tower doesn't fall apart as much. So I don't know where that leaves me on either of these
Let me
films.
throw,
Would you
let me
be
throw in
interested-
a tidbit comparison here really quickly. These two films are well known for their length. And I just was a little curious. How do they compare? We can talk about the cinematography. Let's talk about runtime. How about The Godfather
Okay.
Part 2 is 3 hours and 22 minutes long, and Lord of the Rings Return of the King is 3 hours 21 minutes.
Hey, there's more movie to Godfather Part 2. There's
Take,
more
like to make
take
movie.
a
that how you
suggestion.
will.
I like to make a suggestion.
Yes,
I would
okay.
like to. Would you be interested, Tanner, in almost like a sort of court of law final closing statement from both Timo and I before you make your call? 'Cause you seem a little bit split.
I am very split, as I've been with all the matchups in this on Dearly. So,
Okay.
Abram, please go right ahead.
That's
Let's do
okay.
Spotlight.
Here's what I'm gonna say.
Don't bring up Spotlight, please.
If I was the one making the list, I would have Part 2, Godfather Part 2 at number 1. And the reason I would is because the best picture is about cinema. And now we're at the top of the list. We gotta get really fucking nerdy and pretentious with it. And here's what I want to say. I love Lord of the Rings. I didn't expect to, but I did. But I think that a lot of the success of Lord of the Rings lies within its spectacle. It's a blockbuster. It's incredible. It's amazing. But when I look at Godfather Part 2, that is your kino. That is straight incredible production on a very human level. That's some actors, that's a camera, that's an incredible script, that's incredible sets, that is our world. It is an incredibly enrapturing story. And I think the ability of Peter Jackson to take us to, I almost said Midgar, I've been thinking of Final Fantasy, Middle Earth, is really impressive, but I think it's mediated by something that Godfather isn't. I think the rawness of the thematic material, the performances, everything about that, the way that Part 2 tracks off of Part 1, same way that Return of the King tracks off of what came before, it's incredible, but I think that the way that you can kind of juxtapose the Corleone rise and fall is so interesting, and again, it's human, it's characters, it's writing, it's direction, it's editing, it's everything so pure and distilled and incredible. I think it is a staggering achievement. I think both are, but I think that this is raw and incredible filmmaking.
It does more with less, and at the behest of not making this video.
No, be quiet, Tanner.
Still gets his court of law.
I'm sorry. I thought
no kangaroo courts here.
I thought
he
your
gets his time
thing
to
was
speak.
already happened. Okay, sorry.
I do not believe in does more with less. Lord of the Rings does more with more. It's. I mean, we're gonna run down the points that I talked about in the episode. The unadaptable movie. I do love that quote from Kubrick where he said that the book could never be turned into a film. And when you read the book, you're like, holy hell, how did he do this? And just that element of taking a largely incorrigible story, a story that is just really, really hard to understand when you're reading it with all these extra characters, and finding and distilling it down into the moments that matter most, and the character beats and the dialogue. And I just, I think the production design is very good, turning New York City, 100 years back for the Vito Corleone sequences are cool, and it works. How do you compare that to just the spectacle of Lord of the Rings, and that, in at least how I view it, it pulls together spectacle with heart. The films, the whole series, but specifically Return of the King, because it wraps everything up, has an intense amount of heart, and it has a lot to say with regards to the nature of good and evil, and some more fundamental story thematic ideas that, while The Godfather Part 2 has very interesting themes about family and these power dynamics and whatnot, we're getting into the real basics with Lord of the Rings of good and evil, and there's something, at least in my mind, that's kind of nice to have that. It's not necessarily questioned in Lord of the Rings that these are good and these are evil. Take that how you will. I will close this out saying that on the previous list, Return of the King was at place number 4, and I was pretty happy with it there. So if it ends up at place number 4 again, I'm pretty happy with that too.
Well, Timo, you're just gonna have to be pretty happy with that, because I showed my hand earlier. I said at the behest of not making
has
this.
to be happy.
Yeah, at the behest of making this video slightly less long, slightly shorter, I'm gonna go with The Godfather Part 2.
Okay, there we go. Godfather Part 2 at number 3. And now we get to have the moment that you've all been waiting for. I'm going to skip over place number 2 because you're going to figure it out as soon as I say
Yeah.
what place number 1
Obviously.
is. And with the highest score we've gotten on the list, it's not the highest score that a film could get by a good margin. This film got a 9.58 when we get into the nitty gritty versus the one below it, a 9.50. So a whopping 8/100ths of a ranking difference. Back to the old number 1. It's Parasite at place number 1 with
look at
Godfather
this.
Part 2 at number 2.
Tucker is ecstatic. He's
Syndication,
screaming.
boys!
He's saluting.
Can I do a little jig?
Tucker, do your little
I
Parasite
shake a little my
jig.
butt, make a little
Jig.
noise, get down
Well,
tonight.
Yeah,
I don't know the lyrics to that song. That's all I know.
you got it.
So there you go. Some thoughts are in order, I think, knowing that Parasite, the first film we ever reviewed. Say what you will about first being the best.
Mm-hmm.
First is
We've
the worst,
thought about
second
it.
is the best. First is the one with the cherry chest, though.
I
Thank
don't
you,
know.
Chuck.
Thank you for adding that.
That really helped my train of thought there. Well, we talked about it first, and
Yeah.
if there's any way to say that it has stood the test of time, that this is it.
The test
Well,
of 36 episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a little funny that we did this because, movies that we reviewed first would be unfairly skewed towards the top. And now at the conclusion of it, the movie that we did first is number 1. So I think that's funny. And obviously our scores reflect that it should be number 1, apparently.
And this film the top 5 films got very high scores across the board. Parasite got a 10 from Tucker, a 9.8 from Tanner, a 9.5 for me, and a 9.0 from Abram. And The Godfather Part 2 got an 8.3 from Tucker, a 9.9 from Tanner, a 9.8 from me, and a 10.0 from Abram. So they're
Just to
very...
clarify,
The
that's part
Godfather.
1?
That's part 1. Godfather Part 1
Yeah.
is...
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
and with this, the two Godfathers sit sandwiched right next to each other.
Buddies till the end.
We separated British ugly nasty brothers at the bottom, but we brought together the Italian mobster brothers.
The great
The Italian
American Italian
familia.
brothers.
The Super Mario brothers, if you will.
The Super Corleone brothers. And they are super, but apparently that parasitic South Korean family, they're more super.
Most certainly.
Yes.
I mean-
I don't really have any. I don't really have any thoughts on this winning out over The Godfather. They were very equally matched on our previous list, and obviously they are here. They are in my very own mind very equally matched, and I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Parasite, welcome back to spot number 1 in the Great Quest re-rank.
That is fairly incredible. Abram, you have the biggest differential between the two films. You care to get a word in edgewise here?
I think it's fair. I mean, I got part 2 moved up a little bit higher, so that's kind of neat for me in my book. But I mean, Parasite is a really incredible, inventive film. But I just think that The Godfather is a timeless film. I really think it stands at the pinnacle of the entire medium. But ultimately, the differential here is so close that I don't feel like it's been robbed. I just feel like it's been slightly edged out. So it stands. I'll begrudgingly allow it. It's not the biggest loss I've taken today, as Argo plummets far beneath it. But again, a testament to why we should have done this in the first place. So
Yeah, absolutely.
democracy lives another day, I suppose.
Yep. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Thank you for helping put together this great long list. As we said at the beginning, the letterboxed list will be updated and thrown in the description of all these videos, so you can check them out. And see where they line up and see where the new films are. We had some winners, we had some losers. Some films stayed in the exact same place. Some went down, some went up. I mean, but I think I alluded it to you guys that by and large the list stayed pretty much the same in terms of trends and groups of films kind of stick together. Very interesting. I like our new rating system. It's better than the previous one. It's a little bit more fun because we can look and be like, oh, why is there such a big gap between Rain Man and Shakespeare in Love? That's not something that we could really think about beforehand. Well, thank you for the answer, Tucker. We won't need it. I think this episode has gone on quite long enough. The
Yes.
we'll be back next week with our talking about Ben-Hur, a very long movie, and you'll get to see the rating system in action, where we all give it our individual scores and they get tallied up, and we'll see where it fits in against some other films, maybe even resulting in ties that need to be tie broken, as we did today.
No, please. No more ties. I'm begging you.
There were a lot. There were a little more than I expected to come out here on this great big Excel spreadsheet. But it's only ever going to get bigger. That's the deal with the quest for the bestest. The quest goes on. A little side. We had to do a little refiguring, but we'll be back better than ever, looking for more movies, trying to figure out what the best one is. And as it stands right now, after 35 whole episodes, it's Parasite. Wow. Parasite, the first film we watched, and apparently the best. So I'll catch you next week. Peace.